by Rabbi Lawrence Kushner. Some seem to be born with a nearly completed puzzle, but most are not. Mostly we're souls going this way and that, trying to assemble our myriad parts. Truth is, no one has within themselves all the pieces to their puzzle. And everyone carries with them at least one and probably many pieces to someone else's puzzle. Sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't. But when you present your piece, which may be worthless to you, to another, whether you know it or not, whether they know it or not, you are a messenger from the Most High. Now that was a wonderful piece of my puzzle. How much time have you wasted trying to explain yourself to people who don't get you? Plenty, right? Yeah, me too. At some point, you and I have had people in our lives who actually made it more difficult to grow psychologically and spiritually. Maybe you still do. And sometimes, I hate to say it, it could be our family members. Sometimes our family members are great spiritual companions, but sometimes they are not. Sometimes our relatives, even though they've known us our whole lives, simply do not understand what we're about, what we care most about, what we need and want, what our deeply held beliefs are. That doesn't mean we don't want to be in relationship with them. We love them. Yet in our heart of hearts, we know they are not the best people with whom to share the depth of our heart. Intentionally stepping onto the path of transformation can be a tricky business. Many twists and turns on the road to spiritual growth, right, Deb? When new ideas challenge old ones, there could be a time of confusion. When new principles bump up against old conditioning, it can be painful. When there's a crossroad looming and we're torn between playing it safe and taking a risk, it can feel really lonely. Times like these are stressful. And in times of stress, it's really tempting to fall back into our old ways of thinking. Change. It may be inevitable, but it's not easy to navigate. It takes a lot of courage to embrace change and allow ourselves to be transformed by it. An understanding friend can really help. Seems to me that most of the time, we fall into our friendships. Now might be a good time to think about whether we have among our many acquaintances at least one or two people who understand our desire to grow and who stand ready and able to support us. If this is not the case for you, it might be a good time to find that person or persons. Now you and I know, as much as the internet has opened up the world to us, this Facebook instant message world we live in can actually create impediments to depth of friendship. Yes, it takes time to get together with a friend or a support group face to face on a regular basis. But you know, I found that giving myself time to share myself with someone who knows and cares about me is one of the most generous and loving gifts I can give myself. I've been in several long-term spiritual support groups over the years, and it's always amazed me how, over time, we keep opening to one another more deeply. Week after week, trust and safety were built until authenticity became the norm and the expectation. See, when there's enough safety, intimacy can grow. And when it does, it's a simply awesome experience. So what in the world is intimacy. It's a word that's thrown around a lot. And most of the time, it's used to describe a sexual relationship. But if you've ever been lonely in a marriage or relationship, you know that there's a lot more to intimacy than sex. As for family members, oh, wowee. My sister Patty and I have recently reconnected after a long period of estrangement. Complicated story, take me out, buy me wine, you can hear the whole thing. But now, it seems that we're both ready to create a new and different kind of relationship. The other day we were talking about why we had never been very close. And she made a statement that really landed. She said, you know, Kathy, because that's what she calls me, in our family growing up, no one really talked to anyone else. You and I simply did not know each other. And I thought, wow, that's really true. And I think it's a really common scenario. See, true intimacy always involves vulnerability. And vulnerability can be pretty scary for a lot of people. As a result, we seem to have lots of strategies for avoiding it. One of these for sure is the overuse of technology for communication. A great convenience to be sure, if what we want is to select a restaurant or exchange some simple information. Yet I don't think anyone here would say that these media are conducive to deep heart conversation. Even when we do get together face to face, too often don't we tend to spend that time chatting? Are we possibly talking more about less that matters? This concerns me on both a personal and community level, because not really knowing the insides of a person makes it far easier to dehumanize them. And dehumanization sets the stage for separation and violence. Now I know it's painful to talk about some things, but you're my family, so after all. And it's one of those painful things is to talk about the gun violence that's taking place in our churches and school today. Yet, we simply must talk about it. Personally, I can't help doing so right now. You see, two of my grandchildren, Kayla and Matt, are students at UNC Charlotte. One of them was on campus when that gunman opened fire a few days ago. And here's how they learned about it. A text went out to the entire student body, and you know what it said? Active shooter. Run, hide, fight. Period. Period. Apparently, a code has been developed for how to deal with a shooter at school. Hearing the kids talk about how terrifying that was really shook me to the core. Hearing them describe trying desperately to get in touch with each other to find out if they were safe was so sad. My youngest grandson, Michael, is just getting ready to start out for college, and he was in the conversation. And you know what he said to me? Guess I better get a gun and learn to use it. He's 18. I was horrified at the thought of him feeling that he needed to take a gun to school with him. Yet I understood. Didn't really know what to say to him at that point. You know, it's different when it hits close to home. It's no longer political. It's personal. Now that shooter was only a boy himself. One described as being lonely and isolated, a misfit. So many people, adults and children alike, seem lonely and isolated these days. I asked the kids if they knew anyone in any of their classes that seemed odd and different, someone people avoid. And they all said they did. And further, they admitted that they really didn't know how to reach out to someone like that. Matt talked about being bullied on Facebook. And they had all seen it happening to others, especially those odd kids. At a perilous time in their lives, when they most need to connect with people who can give them guidance and a sense of belonging, many of our children are living in terror. In fact, my grandkids said to me, "Look, Grandma, it's the new normal." If that doesn't send a chill up your spine, I don't know what would. I wonder, do most of us grown-ups, have someone to really talk things out with? Have we modeled this with our young people? Do our kids even know how to have a real heart-centered conversation about important things? We have this endless stalemate going on in this country about gun control. An endless debate between the guns are the problem group and the mental health is the problem group. Okay, come on. How can it not be both? What I don't hear anyone talking about is the loneliness, isolation, and lack of intimacy that have become hallmarks of our society. Apparently, we'd rather hunker down in our ideological bunkers and send out tweets than have heart-centered conversations with one another. I don't know what side of the guns versus mental health debate you're on, but regardless, does that make sense to you? There's a story about a Hasidic rabbi renowned for his piety. He was unexpectedly confronted one day by one of his devoted disciples. Sorry, my God, throat thing. In a burst of feeling, the young student exclaimed, "My master, how I love you." The old teacher looked up from his books and asked the young man, "Do you know what hurts me, my son?" The disciple was puzzled. Composing himself, he stuttered, "I don't understand your question, Rabbi. I'm trying to tell you how much you mean to me, and you confuse me with irrelevant questions." "My question is neither confusing nor irrelevant," the rabbi replied, "for if you do not know what hurts me, how can you truly love me?" There is no shortcut to intimacy, no such thing as fast food connection. It takes time to really know and connect in the heart with someone, and it requires commitment, because intimacy brings us face to face with our gods and our demons. It also takes courage, because it challenges us to open up, to care, to let ourselves be seen, and not just when we think we're looking good. Most of us are far more comfortable doing things for and with one another than we are sharing our true selves with one another. We have all kinds of acquaintances, classmates, co-workers, business partners, neighbors. But how many people are there in your life with whom you communicate your deepest longings, dreams, and feelings? Who do you call when you're disappointed or down on yourself? Who reminds you who you really are when you've forgotten? When you are struggling with a decision, who listens deeply while remaining absolutely certain that you will know exactly the right thing to do? When you have a triumph or success to share, who do you want to tell? Who will celebrate with you and not be competitive or jealous? And when you're thinking of giving up your dream, who is it who won't let you? Who can confront you on your stuff and leave you feeling loved? There's a lot of confusion about intimacy. On the one hand, we make the mistake of quickly becoming intimate with people we barely know. On the other, we're afraid to share our true feelings with someone who has shown their love for us over and over again. There's a real art to building an authentic friendship. It takes an investment of time, energy, self-awareness, patience, courage. So it's a good idea to be intentional about choosing people who can really be with you as you grow. People whose heart, character, and values you admire. Someone patient, because you know the only thing harder than finding a true friend is being a true friend. Recently, someone asked me how they could know when they're receiving true guidance from Spirit and when it's their ego talking. Well, one of the best ways I know is to have a trusted friend who's committed to the same spiritual values you are, someone you can talk these things over with. So often, I don't know about you, but I hear my own truth far more deeply when I speak the words in my own voice. It's much better than mulling them over in my mind because, you see, my mind is kind of a dangerous territory sometimes. Not the best environment for sound thinking and decision making, especially under stress. And I know what you mean, that you know what I mean. So today I'm challenging all of us to shift the priorities of our busy lives a bit. To make time to find and nurture at least one intimate friendship. Even better, call together a small group of open or like-minded people who really know and support your intention to live a spiritually centered life. Someone who sees you realistically and loves you anyway. Someone who empathizes with your failings and frustrations while continually calling you to your highest and best. All of the great sages and saints have known the importance of having a friend like this. Sepp often, you know this, likes to talk about his mountain climbing days. One of the greatest pieces of wisdom every mountain climber understood was that no one should ever go up that mountain alone. They knew how vital it was to choose trustworthy climbing partners, because when the going gets rough, they needed to be able to depend on one another. They needed to trust one another's skill and level-headedness completely so that they could give their full attention to the climb itself. Well, the same is true in our quest for spiritual growth, which, in its own way, is no less challenging or rewarding than mountain climbing. Most of us have had experience in our lives that make it hard for us to trust. It really hurts when we share something precious to us and it's not heard in the heart, or worse, not valued. Most of us have been untrustworthy friends from time to time, and that hurts too. But we can't give up. The stakes are simply too high. Loss of trust is a terrible sense of separation. But we need to heal it. And the only way to really heal it, and I know we've tried lots of other stuff, the only way to really heal it is to risk opening up again and again and again. When we find someone who wants to be a true friend to us, who has our best in mind, and who has the capacity to listen in the heart, we've got to do the work of relearning trust. We can't go running away every time something happens that scares us. Intimacy calls us to be present for one another, to be able to stay connected in the heart with a friend in his most vulnerable moments. I'm thinking about a story told by priest and scholar Henry Nouwen in his book Here and Now. And he says, I remember the time a friend came to me and told me that his wife had left him that day. He sat in front of me, tears streaming from his eyes. I didn't know what to say. There simply was nothing to say. But my friend didn't need words. What he needed was simply to be with a friend. I held his hand in mine, and we sat there silently. And for a moment I wanted to ask him how and why it had all happened, but I knew that this was just not the time for questions. It was just a time to be together as friends who had nothing to say, who were not afraid to be silent together, who were not afraid to feel what was going on. Whenever I think of that day now and says, I feel a deep gratitude that my friend took the risk to entrust his grief to me. So, do you have someone you can tell your story to? And I'm not talking about a chronicle of your life events or successes, but the story of you. What you long for and feel about things, who you've loved and how you've loved them, your joys and heartbreaks, and how they've affected the way you live your life today. Deep down, we human beings, even though we're afraid to be vulnerable, desperately want to be seen and known by someone. That is how we heal. We don't hesitate to avail ourselves of healing modalities, ranging from traditional medical professionals to pills to energy healers. But there is no healing modality, this is my experience, no healing modality that can do more for us than a loving friend who listens to us can do. There's no way to calculate the amount of physical, spiritual, and emotional illness that has been caused by unexpressed feelings and profound loneliness. Nor is there a limit to the healing that can happen in a moment of heart-centered connection. Buddhist monk Jack Kornfield said, spiritual maturity is the acceptance of life in relationship. While prayer, stillness, and meditation are essential practices, he says, they can also be ways to avoid unmasking and revealing ourselves to another. For me, God can most easily be found and experienced through others. How can I ever expect to learn about forgiveness and compassion except through the experience of giving and receiving them? From rocking horse to rocking chair, friendship keeps teaching us how to be human. Making and keeping a friend is a spiritual adventure requiring the diligent practice of attention, listening, kindness, nurturing, and honesty. It's truly a hero's journey, but one that leads us toward the realization of our inherent wholeness. The other day, I was talking to some gay friends. I've known them for a long, long time. And one of them opened up about fears around his coming out of the closet, admitting that he was gay and letting people see him together with his partner. And I know I come from up north, but I was amazed. I said to them, how long have you been together? And he said, 32 years. And I said, who cares whether you're gay or straight? That is an inspiring story. They're thinking about it, I guess. In the eyes of a friend who loves us, we see the reflection of our goodness and our beauty. The heart of a friend shows us what God is like and how precious and utterly lovable we are.